The guides have said quite simply, when you think you don't know, and when you're knowing, you're not thinking. And they say when you're truly knowing something, there is never a question involved.
Oh, my friend, I hope you can make a little time for this conversation with Paul Selig. Your mind is going to be blown. We really dove deep and talk about, undoing structures, a time of reckoning, really getting who you are, these questions. Who am I? What am I here for? What am I to learn? How do you honor your true self? I mean, this and so much more. And I will share with you. I wasn't sure. Paul said maybe he wasn't sure if the guides would come through. They did come through towards the end. So I hope you love and enjoy this conversation as much as I did. And as always, I love you and your you. Hello, you family, near and far. This is an interview that I'm telling you right now. Make some time, give yourself the time, space, and grace to listen and to tune in. I'm so excited. Our guest today is someone I've wanted to interview for a long time. I love your work, Paul. We have Paul Selig here today, who's a very well-known channel, and just I've learned so much from you, and I am so grateful for your time and energy and to share your wisdom.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
So I think to start, for some who I'm sure most do know who you are, Paul, but there might be a few who don't know your story, don't know how you got into channeling. I'm assuming you weren't doing this when you were 8 years old or 18 years old. I know you had a life before this. Can you just share a little bit about your journey getting into this work and what that looked like before, and then kind of what the pivotal moment was?
Well, I was raised something of an atheist. When I was 25, I had a sort of newly minted master's from Yale, and my life looked like it was going great, and I was a train wreck, really, is what was going on. And I started to pray for the first time in my life, and I heard a voice telling me what to do, and the next day I quit drinking, and, everything pretty much all happened all at once, and I found myself on a spiritual path that I wasn't expecting. I had an experience shortly thereafter during this thing that people were calling the harmonic convergence, one of these sort of big energy activation days, which now they seem to come every 2 weeks, and I don't pay much attention to them. But back then, it sounded like a big deal. I heard people were going to be waking up, and I thought, well, if there's a God and you ask to be woken up, why would it want to say no? I was beginning to think that there might be. And I went up to my roof and I asked to be woken up, and I had an experience that people later said sounded like a Kundalini awakening. I don't know. I didn't know what that was. It was just energy coursing through my body and out through the top of my head. And I started seeing little lights around people after that. And I studied a form of energy healing to get a context for what I was starting to experience. And I was volunteering at a center. It was the height of the AIDS epidemic, and I was volunteering at a center that had opened to provide services for people with life-challenging illness, doing this hands-on stuff that I had just studied. And I found when I had my hands on people's bodies, I began to hear things for them that they would confirm, and I could feel the energy move, and I could often start to feel in my body what was going on in theirs. And so my world was kind of being turned inside out. I'm still a bit of a skeptic about a lot of things, and I was getting palpable physical evidence to phenomena that I wouldn't have necessarily believed in beforehand. And I started a little group that met in my apartment for 18 years, where I was opening up as a channel. And I wasn't planning on doing that, but that's what happened. And I was a college teacher for all those years. I taught at NYU, and I ran a graduate program at a small, now defunct hippie college called Goddard, which I loved dearly. And it wasn't until I was 48 years old, I think, and this had begun when I was 25 and then 30 when I studied healing. When I stopped smoking at 48, the guides started dictating lectures through me, which hadn't happened before. I was hearing and I was bringing through energy, but not in the way that they have begun doing all the time. And when I was willing to do that for 2 weeks, or not 2 weeks, it was a few months, actually 2 months or so of taking, these lectures through in this little group that met in my apartment, they said, we have a book to write, and if you take 2 weeks, we'll do it. And now they've dictated 13 books. The first one did take about 2 weeks, maybe a couple of days more, because I took a couple of days off to go teach. And they've done almost a book a year ever since then. The books take, between weeks or maybe a couple of months at the most, depending on how frequently I channel. But the books are all the unedited transcripts of the lectures that my guides bring through in book form. They say chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 10. I'm just taking dictation, so I think of myself as a spoken stenographer more than anything else. And that's kind of the story. Now it's what I do full time and has been for about 9 years now. I left my academic life and began to tour with this work. And only because there was no other thing to do. I couldn't avoid it anymore. It was just too present, and I was too active in the work myself.
Thank you so much for sharing that. What I love, there's so many aspects here because I'm thinking, for all of our beautiful soul family tuning in, wherever they are, when you look at the kind of the back of the tapestry, right? Now we can see the beautiful tapestry, but the back where you see all the knots, it sounds like struggled with alcohol and able to be in recovery from that. And then you were on the track of, academia, and what I heard was really setting this intention of wanting to be part of this awakening and allowing yourself.
I could not have cared less, to be honest with you. No. Oh, no, no, no. I wasn't nearly that altruistic.
Okay.
And there wasn't some great big thing happening. I showed up and I did this work once a week in my apartment. I'd put up the chairs, I'd pass the basket, people put $10 in. And, I was trying to have a spiritual life. That's really what I wanted. I had enough of an experience of whatever one might call God, that's what I wanted. And I don't like even being thought of as a player in some field of people that are doing this wide world work. It makes it overly important to me. The job is still the job. I show up, I do my job, I take the dictation. I've developed psychically as a result of this stuff, and I can help people that way and in interesting ways, or ways that are interesting to me. Did I sign on for something larger? Probably. I probably did. I mean, my guides have said as much. But I went kicking and screaming, and I like the metaphor of the knots on the back of the tapestry. Mine was a knotted mess. It's much, much, much better now than it used to be. But that's a long time. I've been doing this now for 30 years.
Yeah. I think this is important because sometimes we can see people that are in this work and it looks like it just happened or they stepped into it. And, 18 years of setting the chairs and passing the basket. And what I'm hearing is, just following directions. I've heard it say following good orderly direction, like following what you're hearing. And 30 years in, this was not overnight. And it's important. I think this is important for people to hear. I just sense, I think we live in a culture where people are looking for the instant gratification fix. Yeah.
I agree. I mean, when people say, I think I might be a channel and how do I make a living doing it? And that's their first question. I have to step back a little bit. I really feel, and it's not that some people don't emerge with gifts fully formed. I don't know. I mean, it just wasn't my case. And I can't speak to other people. I'm not going to judge them. But I agree that we kind of live in a world right now where people can watch 2 YouTube videos and be an expert in something. Yeah. I had to be developed. And I think what happened in that apartment was I was developed. And I wanted to do this because I liked being in the energy. The information that was coming through when I did this was somewhat secondary to the energy. Because you couldn't fake the energy. You could feel it. Everybody could feel it. They'd say, receive a hand on your third eye. And it was like Beetlejuice. Everybody's head would go back. It was like, wow, this is really something. This is so powerful. And I needed something like that was experiential. The information was less interesting to me until they began to lecture. And even then, I didn't want to transcribe it because that meant I would have had to record it, and I didn't want to hear myself channel. I've never really liked doing that. And it wasn't until some old-time medium, 𝐀𝐰𝐚𝐤𝐞𝐧, she was a wonderful woman, and a mentor of mine, heard that I was not recording these lectures and was outraged. How dare you not do that? And I went, I guess I better do this. And the first time I recorded and transcribed it, I saw that it was a 5-page, essay, really lecture that had needed no correcting. And I had been a writer with a terribly, terribly debilitating sense of writer's block. So 5 pages, no editing, I was shocked and thrilled. And I just wanted to see if it would keep happening. That's why I did the groups. I wanted to see if it would keep happening and share the experience. When you're in a collective experience of something like this, it's actually far more clarifying and supportive, I think, than when one is with themselves alone. And they can say, well, maybe I imagined it. But when you're all getting the same thing at the same time, it's a little tougher to do that.
Yeah. Well, and I know there's a lot of teachings now that have come through you being the dictation, taking dictation from the guides. And something that, we talk a lot about here is this idea that it can seem like we're separate, and the reality of not being separate. And so you just mentioned the collective, and maybe we can talk a little bit about your understanding through the guides about this. I think it's a hard one sometimes because it seems so, I'm over here, you're over there, and yet that's not necessarily the
I
reality.
think both things are true at different levels.
Yeah.
That's how I perceive it. So, the guides I work with have said that they call it the common field. We live in a common field, which they describe as an octave of tone or music, and that there are other octaves that exist beyond the one that we know. And they're all sort of, stacked in their own way. And that's my word, stacked. It's not theirs. And they say that when you move to the octave above in vibration, you move beyond the octave where fear is informing things. And the energy of fear is the claim of separation. So while I think it's very helpful to know where my body ends and somebody else's body starts, so I don't bump into them, when I'm, passing them in the stairway, I think all that stuff is necessary. But on a higher level, we're all of the same source. And while we're all individuated consciousness and have souls at another level, we're all of one source. So when you move to that thinking, you kind of have to move through the contradictions that arise. So I actually, the guides in, I think their third or fourth book was called the Book of Mastery. They said early in the book, nothing is real. And I went, okay, I've heard that before. I didn't care. I said, great. I just said it because it was part of the dictation. And then the next day in dictation, they said, and everything is real. And I freaked out because I thought, oh my God, they've contradicted themselves. And the rule with the book is I don't get to go back and change anything. And then they unpacked that they're both true. And later I was co-facilitating a month-long teaching at the Esalen Institute with a guy named Jeffrey Kripal, who's was at the time at least, the head of the religious studies program at Rice University. And I brought up this contradiction. He said, not a contradiction at all. It's the teachings of Meister Eckhart, the mystic from whatever century he was writing in. And he explained it to me. And it's the same kind of idea. Both are true at the same time. I don't know if that helps.
Absolutely. And I think this holding the space of the both and, the paradox, as you're speaking, the energy I can even feel in this, it's an asking of all of us I'm curious what you hear from the guides, get out of your brain, the logic thinking. It feels like an energy that's something else. It can't be trying to figure it out. At least for me, it doesn't work because then I get in my head versus the feeling into it. That feels true, what you're saying.
I have had a loud head my whole life. It used to be very negative. When I got sober, I had a committee that was self-condemning and nonstop. And it was really quite something to live through. And that's not the case anymore for me over the years. And I'm grateful for that. I still think too much, and I've been known to worry too much, which is thinking. The guides have said quite simply, when you think, you don't know. And when you're knowing, you're not thinking. And they say when you're truly knowing something, there is never a question involved. Now, I don't know how to make a chicken, so I'm going to probably look up the recipe and figure out how to do that. And I'm learning something. So I think that their thinking is hugely important. We have the ability, we've been gifted with it, we have language. It comes down to a very simple idea, which the guides explained to me. And I mean, they told me this when I was in my early 30s and having a very rough time, and had split with a teacher and a mentor, and I didn't know what I was going to do anymore. And I needed help, and they said, freedom comes when the throne relinquishes its king. And I was like, what does that mean? Like, who cares? That's awful. That doesn't mean, it means everything. It's the whole teaching. Who sits in the throne? What aspect of self is running the show? If it's the personality self, and they call it a structure, the personality is a structure, and that it's built primarily on past experience and the information of the common field. What it means to be a man, what it means to be successful or beautiful or happy. All of these things, which is the good couch and the bad couch, which one you're going to buy. All of those things are sorts of massed information. So the personality self, if that's running the show, that's the level of agreement, which is vibrational accord that one will have. And my personality self was kind of like the Red Queen in Alice in Wonderland, like off with their heads, The true self, or they call it the divine self, or the God within, or the indwelling Christ, you can call it any one of those things. It's all the same stuff, I think, doesn't matter. That is the aspect of us that knows and that is not operating in fear and has not been entrained through fear, has not been instructed in the benefits of separation, does not believe or think of things in terms of borders and religions and, the sort of, I don't know, whatever the collective ways that we have managed to exclude others and define ourselves as separate. When you move to that part of yourself and that becomes operative and sort of begins to run the show, you begin to have a very different experience of being. And according to the guides, at that level, you're supporting a shift in consciousness, true presence in being at the level of vibration that you're holding is almost a radiant thing that reclaims what it encounters at the same level of vibration. So they call that the upper room. So the upper room is the next octave up. And the process that they take us through in their books is, I suspect, the process of transposition. They've said, any song can be sung in any octave into infinity beyond what the ears can hear or the vocal cords can sing. But it can still happen. The song can be sung in a higher way. So to be transposed is to leave the idea of self that's been moored in separation and all of the reasons why that must be maintained, which includes the blame and the shame and the violence against self and others and the greed and everything that you might think of as somewhat an antithesis to divine principle. Those things, when they are released, support us in claiming ourselves and everything else in a much higher way.
I resonate with this so deeply. We actually have interviewed many on here about the Course in Miracles. It actually reminds me a little bit what you're speaking about, that nothing that's unreal can be is true, and nothing real can be threatened. And as you're, I just, I, I'm already on a high from this conversation because it's so powerful. This to me, Paul, is the conversation for all of us to be having with ourselves, right? And maybe to ask you with the upper room, it's funny. I was watching an interview you did, and I was thinking, gosh, I love what you were saying about this, and thinking, the question I think is then, am I operating from small self or am I operating from my true self? And I'm curious for you, human being, I can't imagine it's always perfectly you're connected to your guides. And what are some ways to know the difference, and what have you learned in that journey?
I mean, what I've learned is one of the things that they've said, and it's one of their simplest teachings. They say the action of fear is to claim more fear. And every choice we make in fear has gotten us more of the same. I say, look at your life. Look at the last choice you made in fear and see what it got you. And it's pretty clear to check that for oneself. And they say, who you put in darkness and what you put in darkness calls you to the darkness. And that's the teaching of vibrational accord. Maybe it's a teaching of forgiveness as well, but they talk about that in different ways. But in some ways, you can't be the light. They say this all the time. You can't be the light and hold another in darkness. That doesn't mean I have to invite somebody over for dinner who broke all my china the last time they came. I don't have to do that. But I can acknowledge that they are who they are and they have the right to be as they are and have my idea of what is required for my sense of peace and safety as well. Doesn't exclude them from being on the planet, may exclude them from my dinner table for a period of time or forever, up to me. So I don't pretend to be ascended. I don't pretend to be enlightened. I'm not. I'm a curmudgeon. I'm a 63-year-old gay guy living on an island who just got his driver's license all these years later.
Congrats.
Big deal. Yeah, I got 2 dogs. I love it. And I'm very happy with what I claimed for myself or what's been created or offered me. It's a bit of all of the same at once. But, I don't pretend to be somewhere I'm not. I try to show up in my integrity as best I can in all ways. If I'm not acting in fear, I know I'm doing something right. The guides also say what you bless blesses you in return. And they say what a blessing is not, blessings and prayers for the victims of this or that shooting or mob violence or whatever awful thing happened. They say a blessing is the realization of the divine presence where it has been refuted, denied, ignored, seen as impossible. Because they say God must be there. Whatever you want to call that energy is still there. It's the same energy that created the canon, created the tree. It's the same thing. It's what we do with this stuff, which is our responsibility and accountability. So to bring a blessing to something is to see or know. Know, they say, means realize the presence of the divine upon it. And that shifts us and our relationship to that. When they used to teach in works, they still do this in workshops, the live events, they begin to work with what they call the echo. And the echo is the active result of blessing. When you claim the action of the divine upon, they'll just partner people up and stand them 5 feet apart from each other. And the guides will have them invoke, I know, which means realize what, which means manifestation. You are in truth, which means the divine energy that must be present. And when that's done, you can feel the energy roll back at you from the other person in waves. It's quite lovely, And so, there's an affect to this stuff. I'm not a good New Ager. I'm really not. I'm so impatient with some stuff. But it's only because I've been around a while and I went through this. I went through this in the late 80s when I had all my crystals piled up by my bed and, I was looking for double numbers everywhere. Tell me, I needed some kind of confirmation that the path that I was on was there. And those prompts were helpful at that time. They really were. And I can't discredit who I was at that time. But I think as we grow, we move into an awareness that even our ideas of what God is are going to be limited by our ideas of what can be. And we can't know the enormity of it. They say, and I like it when they say this because it helps me, you can't know the entirety of the ocean. It's too vast. But every time you step into the ocean to swim, you know the ocean as you can. And so to be in God and to accept that is to know or realize that source as presence or omnipresence or whatever you want to call it.
Beautiful. I want to ask you, going back for a moment, you were talking about the power of this energy when that it was kind of a driving force for a while. Just you couldn't miss it. I am curious. So 2 questions. One is, today, do you feel the guides? Is that energy still palpable? And the second question, because I can always kind of hear, so for anyone listening, how would you suggest, or how do the guides suggest tuning into that energy no matter who you are?
Well, So I kind of make a distinction between the guides, and the God within. My first experience really was with the divine spark. The guides I work with call it the monad. There's lots of different names for it, the inner light, the flame, the heart. That's really what I cared about, and that's what I wanted a relationship with. And the challenge, really, when I look back at this and working with the guides, is that you end up with kind of substitutes for that. I'm going to ask my angels or the saints or my guides, and then you're back to working with something external. The guides I work with are teachers, they're teachers, and they're not God, or, that's not how I can address them. I don't even know if I remember what your question was, so maybe you want to just say it again quick, and I can try to
Yeah, the
explain.
energy. Well, I guess the first part is how you had that energy. It was palpable. You would touch
Yeah.
someone, feel it. How does that show up today? Do you feel,
Ah,
see, sense it?
yeah, I mean, I'm highly clairsentient, which is clear feeling. People now call it an empath, and everybody's an empath at one level or another. When I work psychically, I step into people. I become them, you know? So if I've never met your mother, but if you give me your mother's name, I might be able to step into her. I might start to resemble her, and I can hear her complaining about your life choices, and can tell you what I hear. And I'm pretty accurate with this stuff. I'm not a good fortune teller. I don't like doing the precog stuff, but I'm really pretty good with understanding the dynamics and the relationships and the characters that emerge when I tune in. And there is the energy of others that I tune into there. I don't practice hands on healing anymore. I haven't for many years. The energy works with and through me when I channel. And the guides I work with attune people to the energy that they work with in ways that are palpable. So you don't need me to do this stuff. I mean, I think any teacher that says you have to have me to do this is probably suspect a little bit. It's available. The energy is available. I am no longer looking to get high off of the energy anymore, which I was when I was new, because I liked getting high, and this was better than the drugs I used to take. I'm not looking for the overpowering, enormous stuff. In the old days, when somebody would faint in one of my classes, I was excited, terrified, but excited. And it would happen. People would keel over sometimes because the energy was really potent. Now I say no drama. I don't need it. They don't need it. And I also have really moved beyond the need, I think, for specialness that can be a bit seductive to anybody when they get into this stuff. My gifts, my abilities. I mean, if I was 6'5", I might be playing basketball and being really happy. I'm built differently. I seem to be built for this odd, strange work. So I still feel the energy. There's one guide. I work with a collective. They use a name. I wish they didn't. They're right now, they're mostly, I call them the guides. The only reason they're really called the guides is that my ex from 20 something years ago used to say, ask the guides this, ask the guides that. And I preferred that to the high holy name that I had. Because the problem with the naming of guides, I suspect, becomes a kind of materialism and attachment to ego, personality, imposing importance. I am channeling so and so, and all that stuff. It's normal again, but I don't think it's the point of any of this. It's got to be the quality and the truth of the information coming through. I don't care if they call themselves Bambi. My spirit guide Bambi may be more ascended than the one calling herself Metatron. It doesn't matter. So the one that I've seen visually, I've only seen a few times, and if I meditated every day, I probably would see him more, but I don't. I'm a bad meditator. And he's come through the same way every time, and he's quite remarkable to see. And I'm grateful that I have had that experience. I used to just see orbs show up when I work. I don't really see those much anymore. It's been a long time since these big blue orbs would show up. And that was around the time that the first book was coming through. The orbs were present and visible. So, you get to this place, and it's what the guides teach. And I'm not saying I've arrived there, but they just say God is, God is, God is. So God is the tree and the air and the sky and your breath and your body and the blood in your veins and the tears rolling down your cheeks when you're heartbroken. And it's all source. It just is. It just is. And it becomes both extraordinary and ordinary simultaneously, which I like. And I'm beginning to have that experience more and more and more without trying to get someplace else. I'm not trying to ascend. I'm trying to let myself be in whatever way is most useful and helpful and happy. And I'm not looking to escape the world through spiritual work, which I probably was doing very, very early on because my life was really sucky for a number of years.
I love this so much, Paul. And the thing that I'm hearing that I think is such an important takeaway is, to me, I'm seeing the shackles off of striving, of trying, I want to be enlightened, to get here, to be there. And what I'm hearing is you said being a couple times, allowing. I think this is a major takeaway, especially anyone tuning in. I know like attracts like. I feel like there's this thing that's happened. There's a lot more people channeling and connecting in. To me, I think of it as the divine source energy, and it's for all of us. We're all made of it. So, and it's like you said earlier, can we hold the connecting without the ego attachment, striving, pushing, needing to get somewhere?
I mean, I agree. It's a lot about allowance. The guys used to end instructions saying, allow, allow, allow. Like that's the work.
Yeah.
Emmett Fox, who is an old New Thought writer that I liked, that I read when I was newly sober, and had quite an impact on me, I have to say, used to say, when you pray, pray with a feather. Pray lightly. Don't pray to, don't throw all your weight, because he would say in spiritual matters, effort defeats itself. And granted, when I was young and developing, I was striving and I did develop. So I'm not, if you want to build muscle, you have to lift weights. I don't think this is about, I'm going to go get drunk and do what I want to do all day. I mean, I have to hold a level of accountability to my actions. That's part of being, I think, a human being in the world. So I'm not saying that there isn't effort involved in this. Some of it's how we hold ourselves and how we hold other people, I guess. But yeah, I don't know. I'm big on allowance, at least right now. If you interview me again next year, I might say something different. But this is where I'm at this moment of my journey.
Yeah, it's beautiful. I know something that you teach, or that comes through a lot, is the claiming your truth, and wanted to ask you to talk a little bit about that and how to do that.
Oh, they talk a lot about it in different ways. There's a whole book called The Book of Truth, which is a real mind bender. But they work with attunements, and the attunements, they say, are spoken language, invocation, incantation, I suppose you could say, and the words are encoded with vibration. And one of the primary ones they work with is, I know who I am in truth, which is identity. I know, and again, know means realize what I am in truth, what means manifestation. And I know how I serve in truth, and that means expression. So knowing who, identity, what, form, manifestation, everything in form, service, expression. And that in and of itself is an attunement that will work with the energy of the system. And people can do that with themselves and with others. In the classes the guides teach, they'll have people stand in front of each other and say it to one another. I know who you are in truth. I know what you are in truth. I know how you serve in truth. And the energy is palpable. And you're addressing the who and the what and the idea of expression beyond the level of personality. Because the guides say what is true is always true. I wasn't always bald. I wasn't always living on an island in the Pacific. I wasn't always channeling, but the essence of who and what I am has probably always been the same, just understood or realized or accepted in different ways.
Yeah, beautiful. There, we were talking earlier about fear, and I don't know if there's ever been a time in this world, so to speak, in 3D world, where there hasn't been fear, and yet least in my 50 years, it feels like there's an escalation of fear and uncertainty in the last year, couple years. And I'm curious what maybe what's come through you through the guides that might be helpful to somebody listening, and that can show up in all different ways. That could so what have you noticed have been the teachings around how to really connect to who we are and move past it?
Well, I mean, there's a collective thing that seems to be happening now and has been happening for some time. In the very first book, which was called I Am the Word, which was dictated in, I don't remember what year it was, 2009, maybe? Um, they said humanity is at a time of reckoning, and a reckoning is a facing of oneself and all of one's creations. And everything that has been created in fear is going to need to be reknown in a higher way. Which my understanding is it means that if the cement holding the bricks of your house are cemented in fear, that house may not stand. And that's also true with structures, whether they be religions or governments or economic systems. All of these things are going to have to be moved to a higher way, because what we have done collectively with these things through our own choices has been perhaps not the highest. The guides have said humanity has been at war since somebody first picked up a rock and threw it at their neighbor. It hasn't stopped. We've been doing it again and again, and we do it so much that we expect that it will always be there, and consequently we get it. So if we expect it, we're going to get it. That's how creative we are. The idea that the times that we're in now are about seeing some of this, seeing abuse of power, seeing our inhumanity to one another, to see the results of, you name it. Everybody knows what's going on in the world right now. As an opportunity to re-see is hopeful, I think, as opportunity, not to just say, oh, well, this is what we get and we're all going to die. I mean, I don't get that. The guides have said for quite some time, humanity is going to make it. Maybe not in the same form that we've had everything, but in a higher, different, or other way. So how does everybody manage through these times? Know the divine self, the part of you that is not afraid. The guides say the true self, the divine self, is not afraid, has never even known fear, isn't ashamed, didn't hurt her mother's feelings, didn't, spend the money gambling. That aspect of self, the divine self that is always there, is available to us if we invite it. I do think it has to be invited, invoked. We've been given free will. If we want to offer that will in some other way, or align that will, which is perhaps a better word, to the higher, we have much support in making other kinds of choices that hopefully will support our world in positive change.
In a way, it's actually quite simple. I think we can make it very challenging. The concept, I know for me, with being you is you, I remember when that kind of came through, and I thought, okay, I can play with that. And I realized it is your true self. It is your divine self. It is the same, whatever we call it, right? Whatever semantics. I love what you said, Paul. I love that you said we have free will. And I think of it like a magic wand. If you hold the wand and you don't wave it, it's not going to do anything. But invoking, intentionally saying, inviting, because it's on us, because we have choice. And that's a really important distinction.
The guides have said that, people talk about manifesting as getting things, like you're all trying to get things. But if you look at your life right now, in the room that you're sitting in, everything in it, you are in accordance with, and accordance means alignment, which means you're in support of its creation. So everything has been manifested at that level, And they say we're always getting what we expect, which is the good and the bad news, both. We always get what we expect. So I think working intentionally is important. I think, though, when people talk about manifestation, And the guides have said this, and it's not the most popular teaching that they brought through. They say most of what you all want or aspire to is what you've been taught to want and to have. What's going to make you okay in the world. It's coming from an old list. If I was only 30 pounds lighter, it's mine. If I was only partnered to somebody who, believed in fidelity, if my kids were only doing what my kids should do to be good citizens, whatever that stuff is, these are ideas that we have inherited. So we're all trying to get stuff that's going to make us, and a certain way. And perhaps there's something other, perhaps it's off of that. And that's when the idea of allowance comes into play. Like I've lived in cities my entire life. I literally live in the jungle now. It's crazy. It's the best thing I ever did. I didn't plan on it. I got rerouted here during COVID. I couldn't go back to Manhattan because I was out of the country and New York was shut down. And I came here and kind of never really left. And that was right for now, but it was better than I could have chosen. So the idea that there may be answers that we don't know and things that we might benefit from that we're not going to be on our vision boards, because they're even better, is actually also very hopeful. And to move into the idea of becoming receptive to source and to divine thought or divine idea and divine intent, that's nice too.
Yeah, it's a great point. I even hear with the manifestation to really look at it a little bit deeper and assess, I'm almost hearing, is it coming from fear, a fear of lack, or is it coming from a place you could say of supporting your higher self, being of service, love? I usually think of it's like, is it fear? Is it love? Like which one?
That works. I mean, the guides, they don't really talk that. I'm not a student of the course. I actually have never read it. I tried when I was in my early 30s, and it was just dense, and I thought it was beautiful, but I didn't commit to it, and as I might have benefited enormously from.
You don't need it. You got the
No.
guides.
But what the guides have said is there's nothing wrong with a house on the hill. Somebody gets to live there. But why do you want it? If you want it to be the envy of your neighbors, you're creating in fear. And you're going to carry that with it. I do live in a house on a hill. It's shocking to me, and, that's what happened. But why I want what I want, I think has to be asked about. And that's a simple thing. It's just simple inquiry.
Yeah.
So you want to date so-and-so, why? Well, he's really good looking. Oh, okay. Or he's got a lot of money. Oh, I'm good with my kids. Oh, whatever. Know what it is. And I'm not a great fan of outlining what should be, because those shoulds, any should is generally informed by personality and fear.
I really appreciate that you just said that. And I can say, as somebody who's building a life business, had a major U-turn in my life, trying to do it from source, where do you want me? I got to tell you, I've never had a business plan. There are not a lot of shoulds, and it can be sometimes unsettling. And it's not perfect. I really appreciate what you're saying, because what I've experienced in the way shorter time than you, but in the time that I've opened to that, is there are ways of adding value, of showing up, gifts that are beyond what I would have put as a should or on my list. I think that's what you're pointing to.
It's sort of metaphysics 101, God, or whatever you want to call that energy, the universe, that's the source. So if you know the source, then you can align to the source. If I think the source of my prosperity is my boss, I'm in trouble the moment the boss gets fired, or the company folds, So it can be that simple. This one area of my life, the channeling stuff, is the one area that I've had to show up a lot. I'm good at that. But everything for this work to become operative has been provided for me, really. I haven't had to go seeking. It's happened in the right order, at the right time, and at the right scale. If I was told when I would buy another psychic when I was in my early 30s and I was doing this stuff. And I said, am I ever going to do this professionally? Is this ever going to be my work? Am I ever going to make like a living doing this kind of thing? And she said, oh, it's guaranteed. And I was like, oh, great. When? She said, like around 48 to 50. I was horrified. I was like 32. I was like, what? Why so long? And this was her answer, which I never forgot. She said, you have been veiled for your own protection. In other words, it wasn't time to be seen because I wasn't ready to handle it. I couldn't. And the choices I would have made then probably would have been very, very different and probably pretty stupid. And it's not that I had any ill intent. I was just, being developed and learning. That's all. By the time it started to happen for me, it had stopped being about me. And that might have been the nice thing, that's all.
I think what you said, I'd love to reiterate this because I'm sensing this is for all of us. You've been veiled for your protection. I think that is for everyone. If you're not where you think you should be, perhaps it's always for your higher good, even if it doesn't seem it. Yeah. So I had asked you earlier, and I have no idea if the guides would like to come through. If not, that's fine. We'll just see how you feel.
We'll see. I haven't, it's not about what I feel. It's, how clear I am for them. I said two things. They're saying we would like to say two things. They're saying stop telling yourselves you don't have the right to be here. You wouldn't be here if you weren't supposed to be here. The lives that you live are your lives, meant to be lived fully, not acquiesced to, out of fear, or obligation. Make choices in love, that is a high claim, that is a high claim. Make choices in your own worth, that is a high claim, that is a high claim, and don't deny the worth of anybody else, and don't deny the worth of anybody else, because they don't conform to your idea of what they should be, or what they should be, or how they should act, or how they should act. Or they know you are worthy, they know they are as well, then know they are as well, however they have come, and whatever they choose, and whatever they choose, period. And they're saying period. That's what I get.
Beautiful. Beautiful. That was right on time. Right on time. I don't know a soul who didn't need to hear that, and just appreciate you so much, Paul. I usually ask this question, I call them heart flares, where your heart or the aspect of you, your true self, or the guides with you, is there some message, maybe something I didn't ask you, or a message coming through, or something you want to share that is just kind of still there for you?
No. I'm in my process, as are we all. It doesn't really end. I don't think there's any place one really arrives to. I think that's a journey, and happy to be on it, and happy to be on it with everybody else, because we have no other option. It's also good news.
And perhaps we chose it.
Perhaps we did.
Yeah. Well, I just thank you for the courage it took to going way back when, putting the drink down, putting your seats around with the basket, listening, following the energy, all the way up to here, to this conversation. It's a blessing. I feel like in this short time there's so many gems dropped. I really honor and appreciate and see the light in you. And I know everyone who tunes in now and at any time is going to be blessed by this conversation and by you. Thank you.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you. And I'll just say thank you to our beloved community, wherever you are, our family. We're all related and connected. May you remember and come back to this as many times as you need. You're worthy. You have everything you need within you. And to always connect with your true self, your USG, your higher self. Remember, you're loved. Mwah. Hello, lovely. Just a quick pause. Have you felt a nudge to make a bigger impact, to serve, to coach, to guide, to lead from your heart and intuition? If so, this is your invitation. Cohort 13 of my Intuitive Life Designer Coach Certification Program begins on September 24th. This is my soulful premier coach certification. It is backed in positive psychology, in science, and some of the leading best healing techniques and tools. It is designed to help you take your passion and your purpose, turn it into your practice. This is more than just a certification. It is a life-changing experience. Learn more now at julieriesler.com/certification.